So, so Tyler works on mobile source voluntary programs, state implementation plans, and state inspection and maintenance programs in EPA's Region 5 Control Strategies section. He has a Bachelor of Biomedical Science from Grand Valley State University with an emphasis in human health. Prior to joining Region 5 state and voluntary programs in 2022, he worked in air compliance and enforcement for 6 years. So take it away, Tyler.
Yeah, thank you for having me. My name is Tyler Salamasick. I work here out of the Chicago office. I used to do this enforcement work when I worked out of Kansas, and I worked for the state of Michigan for a few years doing stationary source inspections. So got a history in compliance, now more on the voluntary side of things. But I'm here to talk about stopping aftermarket defeat devices. So one of the initiatives we have here at EPA is working with mobile sources and tampering and addressing that as an issue. And let me just pop right into why is this important? So we have air quality concerns, which are both an environmental and a public health concern. And vehicles account for a big portion of air emissions in the country. They actually account for about half of all nitrogen oxide emissions, which is a contributor to smog, which causes, premature mortality, aggravated respiratory and cardiovascular disease. It aggravates asthma and a bunch of other things you can read off on the list of there. But a number of studies showing diesel exhaust increasing incidence of lung cancer. So it's a health concern and an environmental one. And how do we address it? We have the Clean Air Act to address air pollution. It was enacted in 1970 by Congress. It's been amended a couple times, but it's in place to protect public health. It's the main goal is public health and in the environment. So we have mobile sources, which are covered under Title II of the Clean Air Act, aptly named mobile source provisions. And this allows EPA to establish vehicle emission standards. And a lot of those standards have been achieved by manufacturers implementing various control devices on vehicles. And as the emission limits get more stringent, you'll see that more control devices actually are required on vehicles. Now, how does this work? We have a few different ways we address this, but we've got light duty, heavy duty, non-road engines. We got locomotives, marine, and ocean going. EPA will go through and periodically update our standard for those, which they generally become more stringent as we get more information. But we're continually reviewing this, and in probably like 2010 is when there was a pretty good size jump in emissions standards, and there was actually a lot of emission control devices that went on around that time. And as those emission controls got more stringent, they became more complex, and we started seeing an increase in tampering. And here's just a quick little diagram. It shows, as we implement these standards, you can see those drops in the chart. So you have an old 1985, 1970s like pre-control, truck, and now we have the standard today where you got your added on controls. So you got your DOC, which is your diesel oxidative catalyst. You got your EGR, which is exhaust gas recirculation, and then you've got OBD, which is your computer. There's also been SCR, which is selective catalytic reduction added, and DPF, which is diesel particulate filter. Now, when people tamper with these or cause a full delete, they remove all those controls and they revert a truck back to a pre-emission control. And actually, in some cases, it's actually worse than the older trucks because we have higher horsepower trucks nowadays. Now, how common is this? And this is actually a pretty surprising slide. EPA is aware of, and this is not an estimate, this is based off of cases we've had. There's over 550,000 trucks that have been deleted since 2009 through 2020. So this isn't including some of our more recent cases since 2020. But it's 550,000 trucks deleted. It's approximately 15% of all trucks that are required to have these controls on them. And this has resulted in an increased emissions of 570,000 tons of excess NOx, 5,000 tons of excess PM, and it's the equivalent of adding 9 million trucks to our roads, which is quite a substantial jump. So what does it do? What are the increases in emissions? Well, if you fully delete one truck, which is fully removing all of the control devices and tuning the software to allow that, you'll see an increase of up to 310 times NOx emissions. Then you have your VOCs, which is next on the list, about 1,000 times more. CO increases around 100 times more, and PMs about 40 times more. The big one of concern is NOx, but obviously the other air contaminants are also of concern. And now this is based off of EPA testing. So EPA actually had some deleted trucks that they tested to take a look at this. And I mean, just for context, if you were to have a small town that had maybe 100 trucks deleted, if they were that 300 times increase, that's the equivalency of adding 31,000 trucks to the road. So it really boosts the emissions more than a lot of people, I think, thought. A lot of people doing this tuning work, I don't think they realized the negative effects they could have on these vehicles. But you know, you might be asking, like, what is a delete? How does it work? You know, what does it look like? And that's where the slide comes in. An aftermarket defeat device is something as common as a straight pipe. So that's kind of like an old term for when people would straight pipe and they would make their cars louder. But if you take a look, I'll show you the next slide. Those straight pipes are actually going in place of where emission controls would be. And when you do this, when you remove these control devices, you'll get error codes in your truck. And that's where things for like software come in. They're called tunes or tuners. And that's just a program that allows a truck to run illegally without a control device in place. So here's a picture. You know, the picture on the left is that snake-like pipe is the exhaust. You can see there's DPF and SCR on there. And the picture on the right is after all those things have been removed. And now you just have a straight pipe in place, zero control on that. And how does it work? You know, you're going to get those error messages. So the onboard diagnostic system diagnostic system is in place to actually prevent these kinds of things from happening. You'll get check engine lights. You'll go into limp mode. The driver will get a notification. You know, they're taken to a shop and they'll get emission error codes on here. So that's why tuners will actually tune it and prevent it from having those fail safes in place. So it allows them to recalibrate it. They can increase a lot of things, and they can increase horsepower with tunes. They can increase airflow, fuel. They can change fuel ratios. They can change all sorts of things. And this is just a picture of one. They've kind of evolved through time, but this is just a common little. You don't even have to actually have that hardware piece. You can see there. You can actually just have it. They can actually have it Bluetooth through their phone, but that's kind of an older picture of what the tuner displays can look like. Now, this activity is illegal. We have civil prohibitions. We have the EPA tampering policy. We have criminal prohibitions, and even some states are getting involved, and some have established some laws to prevent this activity. EPA came out with the NCI, which we were discussing a little bit earlier, maybe coming to an end, but we have the compliance initiative that trained up all the regions. So we have regional staff in every office that's working on this stuff. So I won't read off the slide directly, but the NCI is our initiative to combat tampering. And here's a link for the website. So if you want to go through, you can click the link. It will take you to our webpage. There's a bunch of information on there. We've got studies. We've got enforcement cases. We've got public documents. So like the tampering policies on there. And here's the prohibition against defeat devices. So removing. It's prohibited to manufacture, sell, offer to sell, install any part on a motor vehicle where the principal effect is to bypass it or defeat or render inoperative any emission control device. And any person that would be doing this should know that the part is doing it when they're offering it for sale. So there's an added aspect of knowing or should know, which if you're a mechanic, and you understand how the vehicle works, that would fall under should know. And then there's prohibitions against tampering. So we have the devices are illegal, the manufacture and sale of them, and then you have the tampering. Even if there's no device included, tampering is also prohibited. So anyone removing emission control devices. One of the things I heard a lot of when I was in the field were, oh, this is for racing only, and we're not going to drive it on the road. That disclaimer, it does not protect the tamperer from any kind of legal action. A lot of companies would use that disclaimer thinking that it would shield them. And then the vehicles were obviously driven on the road commonly, very, very commonly. So there is no exemption for off-road use or racing. EPA has a tampering policy. So the policy, it allows for the service and sale of aftermarket parts, so long as there's a reasonable basis that those parts do not increase emissions. So you can still put on aftermarket devices so long as they aren't inhibiting or tampering with an emission control device. So like there's exhaust out there with all the control devices in place, has a muffler on it, maybe it modifies the sound a little bit, but the company will have something like a CARB. So CARB executive order is kind of a approval from CARB out in California saying like, we've evaluated this device. We don't believe it increases emissions. So as long as someone is selling parts and they have something like that or a reasonable demonstration that it doesn't increase emissions, you can still legally sell aftermarket parts. This isn't making all aftermarket parts illegal. And we also have criminal prohibitions. So in addition to our civil enforcement, we have criminal investigators that will pursue these crimes. And it is a crime to knowingly falsify, tamper with, or render inaccurate any monitoring device. So a lot of these emission controls will have sensors on them, and that's a big part of it. And the onboard diagnostics is part of that sensor program. So tampering with the OBD is also not only civil, but a criminal offense as well. So facing the consequences. So what kind of penalties are out there? Currently, adjusted for inflation is we have a penalty up to $55,580 per vehicle or engine that's been tampered with. But that's by manufacturer or a dealer. So there is actually more stringent, or there's higher penalties for dealers and manufacturers that get caught tampering. We have up to 5,580 per each act. So each act of tampering, removal of an SCR is one, removal of a EGR is another, and you go down the list. So for each one of those acts is a violation, then you have another 5,580 per each device. So if a shop has been doing this, they do it to multiple vehicles, those penalties can add up pretty quickly. And that bottom bullet point is good to know. Individuals, dealers, or manufacturers are all liable if they cause it, including the request of tampering. Now, some states have regulations in place. I don't have a list of them, but it's something that states could do. States can get involved or pass legislation to work on these things. Some states already have existing legislation in place, and some of them have both civil and criminal prohibitions as well. States could be a really big partner in this, and they have been in some of the regions. Even if they don't have enforcement actions, they could do education and outreach. Or other states have prevented registration of tampered vehicles. I've seen a few states that actually have made it illegal to resell a tampered vehicle. So that ends up being an issue when they try to like transfer titles and stuff. Like some states will have like vehicle emissions check or a safety check before, and others are adding that tampering aspect to it. And then they could also do the same kind of enforcement work that we do. But what kind of results have we had? So since 2015, we've resolved over 130 plus civil cases, and those are in all 10 regions. So each of our regions have had at least one. I mean they've had multiples, but those 130 cases are spread out across the United States, and that includes anywhere from parts manufacturers, someone retailing the parts, commercial fleets, and tampering shops. So we've kind of addressed it at all different angles, top to bottom. Here's a case that will settle out in Region 9, Extreme Diesel Performance, and they announced that they've stopped selling parts. They had a pretty good sized penalty, 1,125,000, and part of our penalty policy has to account for ability to pay. So you'll see some cases where they have a lot of parts sold or installed, and their penalty might still be high, but not as high as it could have been. And a big part of that's due to ability to pay calculations. So that if you see a discrepancy there, that'd be why. Here's another case, Region 5, the sale of 1,892 aftermarket defeat devices. So they got a penalty of 300,000, and they had to perform a supplemental environmental project of 275,000. So pretty good size penalty amount on that one as well. And that was out in Region 5, my region. Gearbox Z, that was Region 9, gets credit for that one. Arizona-based manufacturer. I don't think I see their penalty amount in here. There's links in here you can click to find more info. The DOJ and EPA. We had a settlement with Advanced Flow Engineering, AFE. I don't know. Some of you guys may know them, and credit goes to Region 9 for that one as well. They manufactured and sold over 63,000 parts, and their penalty was $250,000 based on ability to pay. Here's another case out of Maine. They had a penalty of 167,000 or 168,700, and they were selling defeat devices. That was a Region 1 and Region 2. We get credit for that one. I think that was a cross-region work. They had 7 total administrative orders as well. Credit for this one goes to Region 1. That was EasyLink. EasyLink was a big time tune seller or manufacturer as well. Idaho company got Premier Performance, $3 million settlement. They were also a pretty good sized company, 64,000 parts approximately. And that was Region 9. We also have some criminal enforcement. So here's another James Love, 52, got a single felony count for tampering. Here's some more criminal cases. They got conspiracy to violate the Clean Air Act. Water management company gets a $2 million fine. I think that one's criminal. I am not sure. But one of the big things, one of the big ways we get these cases is through tips. And we get I don't know how to put this. We get a variety of tips and of varying quality. And what makes a good tip is detail. The more detail someone can provide when they are reporting suspected tampering, the better the chances of us being able to follow up on it. Sometimes people will leave vague tips like, hey, the guy down the road has been tampering tons of trucks. And that's it. And I mean, that level of detail is just, it's lacking. But if we can get something, where someone knows maybe that they have an invoice or they have a rough approximation or, any kind of evidence helps. It helps with developing the initial case because we do get quite a few of these and we cannot address all of them. So, the higher quality of the tip, the more likely we're actually able to find something good out of it. But does anyone have any questions? I know I cruised right through that. So if anybody has questions on how tampering works, or they are interested in prevalence of this, I can hop back to a few of those slides. I can't tell, is anyone raising their hand?
I haven't seen anyone. Sometimes they might oppose something in the chat, but I don't see anything in the chat. But I do have a question.
Yeah.
So there is, and I'm far from an expert as far as engine manufacturers, but there's a term called original engine
Configuration.
manufacturer, OEM, I think.
Oh yeah.
Is that original engine manufacturer or
Original engineering.
but it's the
original equipment.
Original equipment manufacturer. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Tony. I think it was Tony. So if you're XYZ company and you want to make replacement parts for OEM, that would be emission control replacement parts. Do you have to go through any type of approval process through EPA?
Wouldn't be through EPA. They would have to do a reasonable demonstration that their control device works as well as the original. And usually people go through CARB for that, where they'll send in a request for a CARB executive order, and then CARB will have a list of requirements that they've got to demonstrate that that device works as well as the original, or doesn't hinder emissions.
When you say CARB, you're referring to California?
Yep, the California Air Resource Board.
Oh, okay. So
EPA doesn't actually have a group that approves changes.
Okay. Is that much like doing a stack test? Oh,
It's a similar concept, yeah. The CARB is they've got a pretty thorough submittal process. So I mean, I think you could probably compare that. It's comparable. I mean, obviously they're two different things, but they'll require testing a lot of the time to show. It just depends on the part. So if someone has just a section of pipe that isn't replacing anything where a control device is, the level of stringency I believe is less than it would be for something if they have a catalyst, like an aftermarket catalyst.
we do have a question, Donovan. So unmute yourself and pose your question.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So certainly some good information. Speaking of CARB executive orders, how would somebody that does not market in California get such an order? Would they be able to get one if they just send it in and say, hey, we're wanting this evaluated, similar to Underwriter Laboratories or similar to that?
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, they would go through CARB. If they can't get a CARB EO, that would probably be that'd be probably suspicious. So you'll see sometimes parts will be called like 49 state compliant, which means that they didn't go through a CARB process, and that kind of raises some flags on like, if it can't pass CARB, then is it increasing emissions? But our standard is a reasonable demonstration. It doesn't increase emissions.
So would CARB issue a letter indicating that they passed or they didn't pass?
Yeah, they get an executive order, or there's like a number associated with it, and then you can look those up. So like you'll see, like there's tunes out there that'll say CARB EO, and then it'll list their number, and you can go on, I believe, on CARB's website and look and make sure it's actually correct.
So you're saying CARB, is that V as in victory, O as in order?
Executive order, EO.
Oh, EO. Okay, sorry.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, CARB issues a lot of executive orders, like when we had the stage 1, stage 2 vapor control systems for gasoline dispensing systems. They had a large series there on different designations as well. I think a 5-tier system for stage 2 systems. So CARB definitely is a very common and more or less, as Tyler's been pointing out, a gold standard. It was just, if somebody had a limited distribution network, like they're only selling in 3 states, they sounds like they can send it to CARB. Is that correct, Tyler?
I don't know the full details of it. You'd have to double check with them, but I think you
Okay.
could. I think you could, as like a potential sales in California. I don't know if you're actually required to sell in California to get one, but that's
Okay.
that's definitely a CARB question.
All right. Yeah, that's sort of what I was looking at. If you didn't sell in California, could you still get one? So it sounds like have to ask CARB to see if that's true.
Yeah, that would be, I think, the best approach. But I mean, we just require the reasonable demonstration. So like if they have an engineering, like we wouldn't go and approve it, but if they have like an engineering analysis to show that it wouldn't, that's a potentially safe part, but it's hard to say from our perspective because we don't approve them. Anyone else have questions on prevalence? I've always thought that the 15% of trucks are required is just kind of wild. I'll go back to that slide real quick. The big thing is, I mean, with that many trucks tampered and that equivalency of vehicles on the road, and that's the potential to impact, states being able to achieve the compliance with the NACs,
Right. Tyler, so this is all focused just
There it
on
is.
diesel. Are there any similar issues with gasoline engines?
Yeah, there are gasoline ones, and if you go on our website, we actually settled a case with Harley Davidson where they were selling defeat devices for motorcycles. That's also illegal. The one you'll see for gasoline commonly is changing horsepower, which they do through usually changing increase in airflow or engine timing, so injection timing. If they set that back, you can increase emissions and get increased horsepower. Or there's the other thing that people do is they remove catalysts, put straight pipes in, and make them loud. It's also illegal. But the NCI was initially and still is primarily geared toward diesel, though tampering with gasoline is still illegal. I think I just saw something pop up in the chat. What does a vehicle owner get out of using a defeat device? So there's a few things people will say the advantages. There's people that do it for performance reasons, which basically if you're putting more air and fuel through an engine, you'll get increased horsepower. But a lot of the times the airflow is restricted by like the diesel particulate filter, so they'll get rid of that so they can boost performance. There's also rolling coal, which is was a pretty common trend where people basically want their trucks to blow black smoke out of the top of their exhaust. So it's a looks thing. It's also kind of a sign that they've increased or tampered with their vehicle. So there's one reason. And then the other one is avoiding maintenance costs. If you have a diesel particulate filter that goes bad and you're looking at $1,000 bill on repairing and replacing it, take it to a mechanic shop and the mechanic will say, hey, for $1,000, I can just get rid of it for you altogether. And they'll sell them a piece of straight pipe with a tune for $1,200, and they won't ever address it again. Calling the police on rolling coal, that depends on what your local ordinance is. There are some police that will have issue with like the haze it creates as like a safety issue. It's kind of hard to say. If it's like a big truck, like a work truck with like a company name on it, you could always forward it to EPA's tampering. And let me pull up that slide real quick. It's tampering on EPA.gov. You can always send it in there with like a company name on the side of the truck, what you saw. generally speaking, we go for kind of big cases, but we've had cases against like single mechanic shops too. It is right there, tampering at EPA.gov.
So, Tyler, how common or what, I guess, frequency, when you're dealing with these cases, are these mostly fleets or do they also involve small vehicle maintenance shops? It sounds like mostly you don't deal with individual vehicle maintenance operations. And I'm guessing most of your cases involve just larger fleet operations.
No, I mean, we did it across the board. So we had anywhere from manufacturers. Here's the slide I'm looking for. We had anywhere from manufacturers of the parts, retailers, commercial fleets, or just tampering shops. So if someone has a single, bay shop and they, delete a few hundred trucks a year, I mean, that few hundred trucks really adds up. But we have a wide variety of enforcement across all different sizes of companies.
So if someone that wants to be legitimate and they believe they're going to be working on these pollution control devices, do they, if they're, I guess, if you're replacing a device, how do you know that you're working with a reputable company as far as parts for those devices? And then when you're removing a device to replace it with theoretically a certified or legitimate control device, do you have to keep that older device for a diesel engine on site for a period of time so that in case you're inspected, you can show the inspector?
I know the first part of the question. If you're removing it to replace it with a legitimate device, and that device is got something like a CARB or it seems reasonable, that's fine. As for keeping it, I know there was a policy on keeping catalyst, but I don't remember the details of that one. I'll have to email you that.
I know with gasoline in Indiana, they look at the gasoline and then catalytic converters, and you have to keep that for like 15 days, I think.
Right.
But when it comes to diesel, they don't look at that at all, I don't think. Oh, it looks like Tony's got a question. Unmute yourself if you wish, or post it to the chat.
No, I was just thinking about that East Peoria case that came out this month. That was pretty expensive. I can't remember the number, but I'm guessing you might have dealt with that. Do you know that one? That shop that
I don't know
fined a lot of money?
I don't know the details on that one. So since I left enforcement and moved over to the voluntary program, I haven't been quite as involved or kind of up to speed on all the active cases. There's a lot of cases going on.
Sounds like Donovan. Donovan.
So we've been talking a lot about ways that people defeat controls to up horsepower. What are some ways that could be used to increase performance and or horsepower without defeating the pollution control devices?
Like there's parts out there that will be like air boxes or like cold air intake that still can have a CARB, and there's some tunes that have them too. So like those are performance parts that are certified not to increase emissions.
Okay, good, because I know that's one of the things is like we keep saying don't do this, don't do that, and it's like,
What can I do?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And while getting what I want out of it. So it's good that there are options.
Yeah.
And that brings to mind when you mentioned tunes and tuners, I wasn't thinking about actually the performance of the engine, but does the word tuner or tunes evoke a negative connotation, or can it be both positive and negative?
I mean, it's something like when you see the performance part, like it obviously it's going to draw attention to it. If someone's saying like they're selling tires, right, that's not going to be a red flag. If someone says I'm selling tunes, there's illegal tunes and there's legal tunes. So that, yeah, I mean, that is something that kind of would draw attention. But if it's a tune that says it's got a CARBO and the CARBO is legitimate, it could be a pretty good, reasonable part that you wouldn't expect to increase emissions.
So if you're looking to buy one of these devices to be installed on your vehicle, what questions should you be asking to make certain you have a legitimate tunes or tuner?
I mean, I think if you were to ask, like, is this CARB compliant? And that's a pretty good one to start with.
Does CARB have a webpage that has all their executive orders with respect to replacement equipment or legitimate tunes that you could go to and say, yeah, here are the legitimate devices?
Yeah, can you guys see this on my screen? I think,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
yeah, if you just click Google CARBO executive orders, I think this is where they keep their stuff. No, where do they do it? We can search. I'm not 100% sure, but you know, CARB would be the one to get a hold of.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Looks like it might be in that D section for aftermarket parts.
Down here, yeah, except catalytic converters. So I think you can look them up here. I haven't really poked around on the website in a long time, but yeah, it looks like you can search them. But yeah, we're interested in putting the word out for this stuff. If you guys know of anyone interested in a presentation on this kind of stuff, would be glad to give it. Even like at a mechanic shop, like not a mechanic shop, it's not just one, but like if people do training on, you know, complying with EPA requirements and stuff. Big part of it is just getting rid of that misconception. A lot of people, like I was in a state that what they had emissions testing, but they were the county north of there, and like, well, we don't do emissions testing here, so it's not a big deal. It's like, well, no, no, you can't tamper anywhere in the United States. It's illegal emissions testing or not. It looks like Peoria was $600,000. Yeah, River City Diesel. Yeah, there's some pretty good sized penalties out there for these.
Do these shops usually, are they aware that they're doing something wrong?
Just
You-
from like my perspective when I was an inspector, there definitely seemed to be a bit of that, you know, and knowingly doing it while knowing it's illegal, it's criminal. But it seems like after EPA started cracking down on some of the bigger companies, a lot of people came to the realization this was not a business that they wanted to be in anymore.
Okay.
Still though, and it's still going on, so. I wonder if I can find for you guys EPA's report that shows the regions. I should have pulled that up before I started the presentation. I don't know if I can find it quickly or not. But we have a report to Congress about, I think it's a report to Congress about tampering.
Yeah, that'd be cool if you were able to find it, even if you were able to find it later. I
Yeah.
can insert a link into our minutes.
I've got some stuff I can send out to you. that you
Okay,
may find helpful.
that would be good. Do you find that as the price of either diesel or gasoline goes up or down, that the number of violations go up or down?
I don't know if anyone's done a correlation for that one. Some of the modifications increase miles per gallon, some of them decrease it. So I'm not sure. A lot of the times with the increased performance, one of the aspects of that is boosting the sheer amount of fuel that goes through. But yeah, I don't know if anyone's looked at that. these
So in
are-
that case, it's more for speed or performance to be able to go fast, not necessarily to be able to burn more, to be able
To
to
get-
burn more efficiently.
Yeah, the one aspect I know of where you can increase your fuel economy is by when they remove the diesel particulate filter, they don't go through a regen cycle, and the regen cycle involves added fuel to increase that temperature to kind of cook off the diesel particulate filter. So I think that's like the one area people will save, and also with engine timing, the way it's set to meet emission standards will decrease fuel economy slightly, but it also greatly decreases internal engine temperature, which reduces NOx emissions. So it's like it was one of the first forms of emission control, which was actually pretty effective, just changing timing. I just pulled this up. Can you want to see this? This is like tampering handout we've got. We've got a couple different things. I'll send out to the group. You guys can take a look at it, but it's just like a 1-page. Here's a 1-page discussion of our compliance initiative. We get another one. This is EPA fact sheet. So this is something you can hand out if you know people doing these kinds of things. It discusses kind of what we talked about today. How do I move that down? We have a pamphlet. Here's a link to our tampering policy. So it's like a 10-page. It goes through tampering, kind of what the prohibitions are. It's pretty good one to look at. And then this was just the enforcement alert that got put out in 2020. This is kind of when a lot of the regions started picking this up. Other regions have been doing it prior to 2020, so I don't want that to be misleading, but this was when the big push came out.
Now, just to verify or confirm, I think you said with racing, there's no exemptions, and I presume the same thing applies to off-road vehicles like off-road trucks for, hauling dirt or some other material.
Right. There's no exemption. With racing is a unique one. So like if it truly is for racing, that's not something EPA is pursuing. And I know there's some caveat to it, so I can't really speak to it, but I'd have to ask Ed more about how it works with specifically race vehicles. Because I don't know enough to talk on that one.
So with racing, I'm thinking they're using something other than diesel or gasoline. So does that have any implication if, say, like you're using an alcohol?
Well, like the focus for the initiative isn't on like true race vehicles specifically, but if someone takes an existing vehicle that it's like say they take an F-150 and say I'm going to use this for racing, that vehicle is already an existing vehicle, so that'd be tampering with it. But I think
Okay.
I think the rules are different if it actually started as a race vehicle, but I don't know the details on that one.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. But I'll ask headquarters on how it specifically works for racing. I don't think the fuel typing is actually the differentiation. Because I mean, people do like tractor racing. I've seen it all. People do, tractor. They do street trucks. It's against the law to tamper with heavy duty off roads like a truck. So if someone takes a John Deere and removes the catalyst on that, like that's also a violation that EPA could pursue. I think I
So
saw.
Ed, yeah, we can share the presentation. Actually,
Yeah.
Jennifer had shared it with me, and I can just forward
Yeah.
that on.
Should be fine. And I'll send out. Could you give me a list of emails I could send? Just or I can send it to you if you want to shoot me an email, or I can send it to Jen too. Either way, it's fine. But if you want to get a hold of me, I can send you those pamphlets and stuff.
Yeah, if you
You have
could,
'em.
and then I can either send it out to the group, to our listserv, or we could post it perhaps on the NSBAP website. Anyone else? Go ahead.
I was just saying, if anybody has any groups they know of that would be interested, we're looking for, giving presentations. So if you have like a community college that works doing like mechanic shop stuff, specifically we want to try to keep it in Region 5. So Wisconsin, Minnesota, Illinois, Ohio, Michigan, and Indiana. But if it's in another region, I could still probably present for it, or I could get that region involved, their headquarters.
I would think vocational technical schools. I know in Indiana, and I don't know how common this is Ivy Tech, and they got a number of campuses throughout the state. I suspect the other states might have similar technical schools with different sub careers. One of which might be vehicle maintenance.
Okay. Something I'll look into, but
yeah, in Indiana, there's Ivy Tech. That's the big one. And then I think some high schools might have a vocational technical offshoot, I guess, for someone who wants to get into that kind of work. Any other questions while we have Tyler available?
And I'll go back to that last slide with my my information on it. So if someone thinks of something later, want to shoot me an email, I'd love to talk about this stuff. So I can answer questions offline too. Here's my email at the very bottom. Ed Kolshinsky is the team lead out of headquarters. Mario's an engineer. And he's been helping do like state outreach. He's really good for technical stuff too. But yeah, there's my email. Tyler Salamasick at EPA.gov.
Okay.
I appreciate you having me.
I appreciate your availability and willingness to, present and discuss and answer questions.
Yeah, no problem. I'll follow up with those answers to you a little bit later.
Actually, I did think of one thing while I'm looking at Lisa's name. I'm thinking of disadvantaged communities, or what they call environmental justice areas. Do you find, is there a greater prevalence of this type of activity in disadvantaged communities?
I don't know if anyone's done a study on if it's more prevalent, but I do know it has a greater impact on EJ areas just because they're disproportionately impacted by mobile emissions. And then these emission standards are being violated, so that it's drastically increasing emissions in those areas.
Is there a way of addressing that?
Like targeting enforcement kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, there are some ways you could probably do it. One of the issues is we don't regulate where sources go in general. So if someone tampers with a vehicle, say in West Michigan, who's to say that it's not going to drive down into Chicago? So it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to address. But there's some things you could focus on, maybe like fleets in those areas. Have you heard of a fleet?
Yeah.
If they have a transportation hub out of an EJ area, and that could be one thing you could use to address it. But that's just one.
Yeah, I was just thinking if there was something applicable to an EJ or disadvantaged community. But you're right. And when you have it starts out in one location, and then you have maybe due to a number of interstates crisscrossing and people living close to the interstate, it's, how do you regulate, something that's going to be temporary, but there's a lot of it, and it's moving, they're moving around. So yeah, I guess that would be a hard target to aim for.
Oh, one of the things too is like I've saw like we had some shops that were tampering. They were like pretty well known for it, and they'd have people when I was in Kansas. I'd be in Missouri. They had people coming from like Arkansas to go have their truck tampered with, like because they knew them. It's like you guys drove all this way, so yeah. I mean, that might be more on the exception side of things, but like when word got out, who was a good tuning was like a big one. If they had someone that was like a good tuner, that was like kind of like a gold star. Like it was kind of like a badge of honor to be a good tuner. They were notorious for a while there.
Well, I don't have any more, and I don't want to just be giving idle talk either. I do appreciate your willingness to present on this topic today to the Small Business Environmental Assistance Program Technical Subcommittee.
Mhm.
Very appreciative. I look forward to what you'll send me, and I'll disseminate that either by email or look for some other means of making that available without sending a boatload of attached documents.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you very much for your presentation today.
Yeah. Appreciate you guys having me. Thank you.
I guess without further ado, we have our next presentation, which actually I think is going to be Tony and Lena Divakar on Echo Notify and climate and the economic justice screening tool. So I'm looking forward to that. I know a little bit about Echo Notify and barely anything about the economic justice screening tool. So I look forward to that. That's going to be June 20th at 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Thanks again. Leanne, if you could stay on briefly.